Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Supporting University Students During COVID-19, with our very own Cary Hopkins Eyles as the presenter today. Cary is, many of you probably know her already. She's the Deputy Director for ICDDR, and she has had many different roles. She's been a counselor, she's been a trainer, and she is also a university instructor, and so she's going to at the University of Tampa here in Florida, and she is going to talk about her experience and also something she's learned about how to support students. Just to let you all know that we, as those of you that have been on before, we've had some issues with our technology, with being Zoom bombed, and so we've switched our technology to have it so it's less interactive. So if you want to ask questions or make a comment, then you have to use the question and answer box. And if you type in the questions, I'll be moderating that, and I will, if it's appropriate, I'll interrupt Cary, and if not, we'll save it to the end, but I will make sure that all the questions get responded to. So Cary, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Kim. So like many of you, we've been thrust into this crisis and opportunity of remote learning. It's not something that I had ever really done on a consistent basis. I'd been lucky enough here with ICUDDR to do some training online and to do some webinars with other opportunities, but I'd never taught university students in a remote setting. So it's really reminded me, or I guess it's in some ways I've had to tweak my style to teaching to the whole person. So you can see here we're used to, as university instructors, focusing on the intellect, focusing on what we want to teach them, what information we want to impart, and really in a lot of ways that's been pushed as a scope of practice. So it's made sense that that's really what we should be doing and that there's certain things we shouldn't be doing. But we're in a situation, and I think it's not just COVID-19, but I think it's probably going to go as we move forward, where we need to be a little more holistic in our style of teaching. So I'm going to go through some of that with you today. So like I said, sometimes we might shy away from certain things, and we may want to have certain boundaries. And that's really important, of course. We always have to maintain our boundaries, whether it's the boundaries of our profession, the boundaries of the institution we work for, our personal boundaries. But on the other hand, we're going to look at the fact that we really can't teach students in an intellectual fashion or get the information we'd like to impart to them without taking care of some of these other needs, because we're in a situation right now where that's just not going to be possible. So there's a lot of different versions of Maslow's hierarchy of needs out there, but I thought this was a particularly cute one. But it also really shows us some important things. So hopefully you're familiar with this, but if not, just to kind of bring us back and remind us about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The idea is this, it's a pyramid structure, right? So at the bottom, we have our physiological needs, like obviously, students not going to be able to be in class or be able to be focused if they can't breathe, they're not getting enough water and food and sleep, if they're not able to take care of their basic needs. And then it moves up, and we're going to go through them in more detail throughout this webinar today. But I think this is really important because sometimes we have an expectation, not just during this time, but in general, that students or learners are going to be able to get to the next level of this hierarchy, when really that's not realistic until those needs are met. So we always have to start with the basic needs, but it's really important right now for us to realize that our physiological and safety needs have become the forefront. On most days in our life, most years, most times, we don't have to generally focus on, are we getting food and water? Are we safe and secure? In most cases. Now, there are certainly parts of the world, there are certainly times where there's war or people who are living in poverty, there's times, But in most cases, most of us are probably privileged enough, fortunate enough, that our physiological needs are generally taken care of and we normally feel pretty safe. This is a time where even if on a daily basis you have enough food, you have enough water, you live in a safe home, the news and the things that are happening across the world are really raising our cortisol, which is that stress hormone, and it's telling our parasympathetic nervous system that we're not safe. So even if on a normal basis you wake up, you're able to make your coffee or your tea, your kids are okay, there's just this undercurrent that we're really not safe. And that's going to affect all of us, no matter what. So I'm going to talk at the end of this. Those of you who know me will not be surprised to know that I will be ending our time together today with a talk about self-care. But we all are in a place where we don't feel that same level of safety and security that we normally do. And then there are a lot of people who really do not have their physiological needs being met right now. So that being said, and I changed, it talks about warmth. Those of us who live in hot climates, we also need an opportunity to make sure that we'll be able to be cool. We need to have the biological requirements for survival. And until and unless those physiological needs are met, we can't move on to even the basic hierarchy of needs of security and safety. And financial security is a huge one right now. A lot of people are not feeling safe and secure that they will be able to make their next mortgage payment or their rent payment. I live in an apartment complex here near the University of South Florida in Tampa, and there are students who I've talked to out, who are out walking their dog or who are out and, they're doing remote learning, which is not how they wanted to learn. And we'll talk about that, and is stressful for them. And then they also have been furloughed from jobs or let go, and it may just be a waitressing job. However, that was how they were paying their rent. That's how they were paying their bills. So it's really important to understand that our students are going to be in different places right now. Their mind may be in a lot of different ways. And another thing with safety and security is we want some level of order and predictability and control. And right now we just don't have that as a people, just in general. So some of these really basic needs, and we have to keep in mind and check in with ourselves, how are we feeling about this as well? So once we're able to have some of the physiological and safety needs met, if we are, then we move into our psychological needs. So this is your belongingness and love needs. So for example, intimate relationships and friends. Well, we know right now that because of social distancing, which some people prefer to call physical distancing, because hopefully socially we're still coming together, we're feeling isolated. We're not able, I'm a big toucher, and I'm missing hugs and physical, that kind of belongingness and that kind of feeling. So, but even just being able to, even if you didn't love going to work every day, you went into work and you said hello to everyone and you chatted, and there were things about it that created and met some needs. And that's not something that a lot of us are getting right now. And then esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment. It's a little bit harder to have that when you're maybe doing your work in your pajamas and not necessarily getting recognized. So we're going to talk about how we help our students with that. So I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm not suggesting that we can meet all of our students' needs. That's just not, it's not possible, and it's not our role. However, we are an authority figure. We are hopefully see ourselves as someone who is here to help. And we can at least check in with our students, and we may have access to resources that they're not aware of. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the levels here, the basic levels. So how do we teach to physiological needs? You're going to notice a trend here. Ask. Years ago, when I worked in a nonprofit here in Tampa, we did a lot of work on being culturally competent. And there's no way to know everyone's culture, everyone's background, how they all want to be treated, their language, their all these different things. So we ask. And sometimes that's not comfortable, but it's something we have to kind of get comfortable with. So we can ask people what they need during this time. And I think sometimes because we're the authority, we're the instructor, we're the professor, we're the doctor, and we feel that we have to know. And we know our subject level really well, but it's really okay, and I think beneficial to our students to show at times that we don't know. So being able to say, you know, I don't know what you guys are going through, but if you want to share with me, if you have needs that are happening right now, I'm here to listen. Or if I do have ideas, I'll offer those. Just offering compassion and empathy to just say things like, I know things are scary right now. I know things are difficult. To relate, you know, they're difficult for me right now as well. Depending on what kind of instruction you're doing, maybe you offer breaks. If these classes are long and arduous, are you able to offer breaks during it? Are you able to have a flexible schedule so students don't feel, you know, if they're getting anxious that they have to sit in front of a screen for however many hours, or if they're trying to, for example, work a different job. Maybe they're having to take on a side job so that they can pay their bills, and that's different hours. So yes, they took a class at a certain time, but now that's changed. So these are the kind of things we have to think about when we're looking at the fact that people are trying to meet their physiological needs. And then when we talk about safety needs, like I said, you'll see a trend. Ask. One of the reasons that we ask is not because we necessarily think people are going to tell us. I'll give you some examples from my course this semester. So I was teaching a class on trauma in the criminal justice system, and I had a really good relationship with my students. And then suddenly we weren't together anymore, right? And we were doing this remotely, and I was doing synchronous Zoom classes at the time that the class met. And what I would do on Zoom is I would say, literally say, is everyone safe? Is everyone well and healthy? And, you know, generally speaking, people aren't sharing something vulnerable or something large that's going on in their life. But the reason that it's so important to ask is because it shows them that I care. It shows them that I'm a safe person to talk to about that. So they may not share on a large forum, but I had quite a few of them who contacted me separately, whether it was at the end of Zoom calls, and I'll give you some examples with that, or whether it was via email. I had a student who had never had anxiety in her life, and this whole situation, she was having daily, almost debilitating anxiety. Well, obviously, I can't be the role of a counselor, or psychologist, psychiatrist, but I was able to talk to her about, I normalized that for her. I told her some resources that were available through the university. I talked to her about telemedicine. You know, there were things I did and that we talked about, and then I checked in with her and she was doing a lot better as we went through. So even sometimes just telling your students, that's really normal because you've been through it, or because you are just an authority and someone who's been around a lot longer than most of our students. So, you know, it may feel uncomfortable the first time you do it, but I've asked them, you know, are you guys safe? Do you have secure housing? Do you have secure employment? One thing I did was part of it is knowing your students, and I always preach, whether it's in counseling, whether it's in teaching, whether it's in yoga, which I also teach, whatever it is, I talk about the fact that we really want to know our students as much as we can, know the people we're working with. So, for example, I had a student who had been very kind of gregarious and talkative in class, and then on Zoom, she really wasn't. And so when everyone else was getting off of our Zoom call, I asked her to stay on for a minute. And I asked her if she was okay. And it turned out that both her and her partner had lost their employment, and she didn't know how they were going to pay for their mortgage. So I was not able to obviously fix that problem for her, but I knew what was going on. She wasn't disengaged from the topic. It wasn't that she didn't care about being in the class anymore or anything like that. And actually at one point, I received an email that was basically like, are you having difficulty paying your mortgage? And, you know, presented some opportunities. So I was able to forward that to her. And I checked in with her later to see how she was doing, and some things had improved. But again, if I didn't come across that resource, that's okay. But at least I let her know that I cared and I noticed the behavior. So another thing that you can do when your students might be having a difficult time right now with their security needs is kind of make a nice background. If you're doing a synchronous class, or even if you're taping it, make it a little bit nice. I have some flowers for you today. Something that maybe makes them a little more secure and safe. And of course, your demeanor is going to do that. Like, I'm always welcoming students when they come on, and I've had students not have their camera on, and I ask them to turn it on so I can see them. Now, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that because we have decent bandwidth here. Now, not everyone can, but you know, sometimes they'll say, well, I didn't turn on my camera because I'm eating. I'm like, it's fine, you know. So just kind of making them comfortable. And obviously you have to have your boundaries of what you're comfortable with, but I'm pretty flexible in that way. So another thing you can do to create some security and safety needs is have a support system or a way for them to address their concerns and questions related to the course. So maybe they can go onto an online discussion board if they're like, what were the pages we were supposed to read? They could ask each other or ask you, or if you're able to answer quickly on email. You know, there's ways that if they start to feel anxious about what is it I have to do for the course right now, there's a way for them to contact you or their peers. And honestly, one nice thing is, if you open up those kind of discussions, they often help each other, whether it's about the course or about other things. Like they changed some of the policies of grading at the university that I work at. And one of the students asked about that, and the other students were able to answer the question better than I would. So then we've hopefully helped with physiological needs, safety and security needs, and now we're moving on to the social needs, which again is difficult during this time. And it's difficult, it would be difficult during other times as well with traditional online learning environments. But now you have the added part of people may be isolated depending on what their situation is. Or they may be in a not great environment at home, and we're going to talk about that as well. So there's some social learning activities you can do and some resources that you can put in an e-learning strategy. As I said, have not been trained in remote learning, and I've been trying to learn and work on this. I've seen some good examples. There are things you can do to make online learning more interactive and engaging, and it can be really neat. Even with my 8-year-old, every day when he gets onto his online learning platform, they have a little poll. So it'll be like, would you rather go to the zoo or the aquarium? It's really just to see that they're on. But what he likes is he'll click on, say, the aquarium, and then underneath it, it says who answered which. And that's like a way for him to connect with his friends. So his best friend's Jamie. So he always looks for, which one did Jamie pick? Oh, I picked the aquarium and Jamie picked the zoo. That's interesting. So, you know, that's a small, obviously, for elementary school kind of example, but there are ways that you can make things more interactive and engaging, ways that people can do projects together or do online polls. There's, you know, we've been talking for years about the gamification of education. There's things like Kahoot and other things that can be done online to engage. And you know, many students' least favorite idea is doing group projects, but especially during this time, there are benefits to having learners work together to complete an online assignment. Maybe they develop a blog or they develop a presentation. In my case, the students already had presentations due for the end of the semester, so they did them synchronously through Zoom, and other students asked them questions. And even if they didn't have specific questions about the topic, they might just ask them something as simple as like, what made you decide to do this topic, which gave them an opportunity to talk about their interest. So when we talk about social needs, we want to encourage, you always want, as much as possible, you want the learning to be student-led, just in general. So what are things that they're interested in? So it's kind of like, sometimes it seems like it's just an icebreaker, it's just a way to take up time. But when we ask our students, what is it that you want to learn from this class? Or what do you want to learn from this, webinar, if we had that opportunity today? So we really want to make sure that we are teaching to the things that people are there for, and that's why, people come to our courses for a reason. And yes, there's certain things that we know are important for them to learn, but I like to go back to, I still at this time will say, I remember, Scott, I remember at the beginning of the class you were really interested in XYZ, and have we covered that? And try to come back to it. So we want to encourage them to discuss key topics with their peers. It might be on social media pages or online forums. We want to give our students plenty of opportunities to connect and communicate with one another so that they're less isolated. And I really like showing my students that I'm human while being obviously professional, but I think that shows a big social connection. I've had a lot of students tell me that it feels rare for them, like they feel cared for by me as their professor, and they don't feel that way from other instructors. And I absolutely know that all the instructors and professors that I've worked with and come in contact with care about their students, and that's why they do this. But sometimes I think that we just don't exactly know how to impart that. We don't exactly know how to show it. So we're moving into Esteem Needs. So it can be challenging, again, just on a normal basis to teach to the esteem needs of our students. But ideally, we at least will try towards this, especially because we're in a university level and we want to be working towards that potentiality of self-actualization. So we want the learners, our students, to feel confident and capable. So it's kind of like when we're giving feedback, and I've recently heard the term of a feedback sandwich, where you say something nice and positive, and then maybe you have critical information in the middle, and then you go back to something positive. So I feel like during this time especially, keep in mind that if we go back to that physiological and safety or security, people's fight or flight can be really activated. So when you're giving feedback during this time, I feel that we have to be more about relationship than even about grading or about evaluation. We want our students to learn. This is not about coddling or dumbing down anything, but they're not going to learn if they're anxious or if they have kind of turned off of what we're saying. So giving them things that they can be successful with, giving them opportunities to get positive feedback, letting them participate. I mean, even, for me, part of it's I've been trained in motivational enhancement techniques from counseling, and I believe in them so strongly that when a student asks a question, I'll just say, that's a really great question. That's not hard to do, and it's not false praise, but it makes them feel like, okay, my participation is valued. It matters that I'm here. It matters that I gave my 2 cents, or that I asked a question, or that I did, whatever it is. So, and I think especially right now, when sometimes our only interaction is on a screen, it's really nice to hear things like that. So we want to give them opportunities to participate, give them assignments, and give them praise whenever they successfully complete a task, or even if they, I feel that there's probably always something positive we can say, even if the student's not getting the best grade or some of their work is not as good as we would have liked, there's still something positive that can be said. And again, that's also an opportunity, I think, to check in with them, especially if a student was doing well and now they seem to not be doing as well. We'll talk about why. There's some reasons why that could be, and we don't want to assume that it's a lack of motivation or a lack of attempts, that their efforts are there. I think it's really important to ask the students what they enjoyed, what they liked or didn't like about what we're doing. And again, being honest as we go along here, like, this is new for me too. So I tried that. What did you guys think? Was that okay? And taking our ego out of it, like, I tried this activity. Did you guys like it? Maybe some of them did and some of them didn't. Telling them it's okay. I'm trying new things, and I would like really true feedback from you on whether it worked or not, because I want to do it in the future or know if I shouldn't. And I think that it helps us because we're getting real feedback, but it also brings them into the discussion. So when we're talking also, so now if we're getting up towards self-actualization, we want to encourage our students to set realistic goals and track their progress along the way. We want to offer them reflection activities that prompt them to think about their current beliefs and question their current assumptions. And this is a really good time to kind of question things. You know, a lot of things have gone by the wayside. A lot of things that seemed important are no longer our day-to-day. And it's our responsibility to give them the tools and knowledge to realize their true potential and purpose so they can strive towards their own personal definition of success, keeping in mind that we don't always know what that is, so it's going to be individualized. So one thing that I think is incredibly important, I touched upon it a little bit earlier, but is just opening the door. If we don't make it clear that we're someone that they can confide in, or that they can ask questions of, or that we're here to support them, then they're not going to do that. I had a student who didn't turn in a paper during this time, just didn't turn it in, didn't respond, didn't contact me at all. And she'd been a really participatory student. As I said, my class is on trauma, and it's like a senior level discussion, and she had been really involved throughout the whole semester. So when I reached out to her and said, I actually thought it was me. I said, I can't find your paper. Did I miss it? And she said, no, I didn't turn it in. She was having problems with her fibromyalgia was really flaring up. And I said, well, why didn't you let me know? Why didn't you talk to me about it? She said, well, all my other professors have made it clear if you're late, just don't even bother. And I said, I really think, yes, some of us put that on our syllabus, and some of us, that's true. But I said, I think you need to at least ask. You need to at least reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling. Here's what's going on. Can I get an extension, or is there something that we can do? And just making sure that students feel comfortable. The answer might be no. We may not be able to make whatever accommodations they're asking for, but I believe that none of us would like our students to feel that they can't reach out to us. So we have different ways that we can teach during this time. Synchronous, I've mentioned a few times. We're holding the class at preset times that students attend together. Or asynchronous, where we're organizing activities. Those might be recorded trainings or sessions. They might be quizzes or discussions that students can complete at a time of their choosing. And there are pros and cons to both. And of course, you can use a combination of both as well. So, some people are kind of afraid that if they do a Zoom class or something similar, that it could be long, it might not be interesting to students, which I guess could be also said of our university lectures. It could be that the Zoom itself glitches or has technical difficulties, which is certainly true. And then there's concerns that people might not be able to attend at the given time. So again, even if it's the time your class was, keeping in mind that our students' lives are very different now. So maybe your class was at 4 o'clock on Monday and Wednesday, and now that student had to take a different job, and they are not able to come to your course during that time. As far as the pros of having classes that are actually held at preset times and students attend together, there's the social support. So we're all there at the same time, talking, seeing how people are doing. There's the maintenance of the group dynamic that has either begun at the beginning of the semester, or if we go into new semesters, you can create and maintain a group dynamic. And it gives you that opportunity to check in. It's really easy, I feel, to lose sight of people when you're just doing asynchronous assignments. So with asynchronous, you can have things like like, for example, this webinar, if we were, to post this and you were able to watch it, you would still get the same information. So you would have that available to watch when you're able to watch it. I've jumped down to the pros here. And you can kind of do it on your own terms. If you have an assignment, a quiz, things like that. So for example, my two sons who are in elementary and middle school here in Florida are doing asynchronous learning for the most part. They have assignments, they have recordings that they watch, they have quizzes that they do online, and they have polls, like I mentioned, things like that. Now, there are some really nice benefits, I can tell you as their mom, to doing it that way. If one of them needs help, we don't have to all do it at the same time. It's really flexible. But they're not really having any social contact, and they can't check in. Their teachers aren't able to check in with them in the same way. So going back to the asynchronous versus synchronous, though, keeping in mind that you can do a combination. So there are a lot of students in Hillsborough County at the elementary and middle school and high school level are having Zoom classes maybe once a week, and also doing other assignments asynchronously. And we can do the same thing as university students or as university faculty. I personally did 2 Zoom classes a week, and that's how I continued my semester. But moving forward, if our semesters are online, I could see doing maybe 1 class a week and then having something where the students were doing things on their own time to be a little more flexible for them. And again, it takes work on our part, because for some of us, it's new. Now, some of you may have been teaching remotely prior to this, and you might have some good ideas to give us at the end. One thing I will absolutely tell you on this topic, but on any other, is I do not have all the answers, and I love learning from you guys. So if you have things that you've tried that have worked fantastically, or things that you were trained on that you want to try or want to share, we would love to hear them. So we've gone through so far kind of the hierarchy of needs and the importance of our role in that. We've talked a little bit about different ways that we can train and teach online, but there's a lot of challenges. And one of the things is a lot of students intentionally they didn't want to do online classes. That's not what they signed up for. So there may be a resistance, or for whatever reason that they didn't want to do that. And then of course, a lot of you around the world, and even here in the States, you might have low bandwidth, or you might not have all the access that you need. Thankfully, here in our county, they were able to give laptops or loan out laptops to students who didn't have them, but that's not the case everywhere. And of course, quality. There could be quality concerns. So some students or areas don't have internet access, and even in families that have internet and computer, a lot of times they're sharing, right? So for example, I'm using my laptop this morning to be here with you guys. If either of my sons needed to have a Zoom class this morning, they wouldn't be able to use this laptop, or they would have to find another way to have that. And we've had those challenges in our family, and we're a fortunate family, so it's more difficult for people who don't have as much as we do. I mentioned earlier home life or environment. So there were students who were living in the dorms, were living in apartments or things like that, who have been required or needed to go home and live with family. That's not always a safe place, as you guys know, and you've probably seen, things like domestic violence going through the roof. Obviously, we work in addiction. We've seen the rates of drug and alcohol use going up, mental health issues increasing, partly for some of those reasons that I mentioned earlier with cortisol and stress. So we really want to be mindful that those are situations that people are in, and sometimes it's easy to forget, if we're not in a difficult situation, that our students, we may see essentially a very different student than who we saw in the classroom. I had a student who reached out to me. She was really engaged student. She used to stay and talk to me after class. She was just really nice to work with. And she reached out to tell me that 5 people in her immediate family had coronavirus. So needless to say, she was really struggling. She had mom and dad were in the home with her and both had coronavirus. Her brother was basically self-quarantined. She had a family member who did not live with her who was in the hospital because of it. So, you know, we have to keep in mind, thankfully she shared that with me, but if she had not, her being less engaged and some of the issues she had would have, I wouldn't have understood why. And she wasn't asking for anything, but in her case, I didn't require a paper of her. There was a paper that was due right around that time. Not something that I had to do, not something that any of you have to do, but to me, she was not going to be able to focus and do the quality of work. And I had already seen a lot of her quality of work. By the end of the semester, she was able to do an oral presentation and show her learning, which to me is what matters. It's not about the specific, did they get all these assignments done? What were their grades? It's really about, did they learn what we were trying to learn over the semester? And motivation and support and drive. So frankly, people's motivation is waning right now. And you're going to see some of you are starting probably to teach summer classes coming up here. And quarantine fatigue is real. And I was just reading an article about it this morning. And of course, this is unprecedented, so we don't know a lot about it. But if you look at things like the research on burnout, you see that that's what a lot of people are feeling. They kind of don't have anything to look forward to. They've been doing the same thing for a while. If you're familiar with the movie Groundhog Day, they feel like they're waking up and seeing the same thing every day. So again, that's not something we can fix, but at the very least, if we can have motivation and empathy, or if we can have empathy and compassion for that, and maybe we can ask them, are there things that we can do that would motivate you or that would assist you in feeling differently about the class? Support. You know, some of us might think that because students are home with family, that they're getting more support, but that's not always the case. You may have family members who think, you know, who give kind of this attitude of, oh, who do you think you are doing your little college class? Or families who are struggling, so they don't think that the student should be focused on school, they should be getting a job or things like that. So again, we can't anticipate all of these issues, but if we're available and empathetic and compassionate and creative, then we can make sure students know that we're there for them and that we're listening, and if there are things we can do, we will. I would never have thought that my kids would get online fatigue. They would play video games and watch YouTube all day, but when they have multiple classes online, assignments online, discussions, chats, they're a little bit tired of it. You know, when my 12-year-old is like, let's go play outside, and that's not, for those of you who have kids that age and nowadays, that's not necessarily their go-to move. You can tell that people are getting a little fatigued of doing everything online. So keeping that in mind when you're creating assignments or creating things for people to do. I've noticed some instructors who are giving students things to do less online, and you know, maybe they share a picture of what they did, whether it's a activity base, or maybe, yes, you have to share it through the computer, but you're able to do some of the work in another way. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I think it's our responsibility to become familiar with resources beyond our usual scope. So I get a lot of emails from my university, and sometimes I pay attention to them, frankly, and sometimes I don't. But I'm paying a lot more attention these days. So if there's, you know, counseling that's available, if there are grants that are available for certain things, if there are whatever kind of resources, I want to know. And sometimes I'll post it on, we have a learning management system. And so sometimes I'll post it on there as a message in case the students missed it, you know, things like that. I want to make sure that there's an awareness of the resources that are available. So as promised, I want to talk a little bit about self-care. I feel that it would be remiss to not talk about how we need to take care of ourselves, as well as how we should encourage and model for our students to take care of themselves. One thing I've done in my class is at fairly early on in the crisis, when we moved to remote learning, I ended my course by having each and every one of the students turn on their camera and share one thing they were doing for self-care. Most of them were, took a walk, took a drive, played with their dog, whatever it was. It wasn't groundbreaking. But the reason it was so important, I think, was multifold. One is it got them thinking, okay, what am I doing to do self-care? And maybe I need to do more. It also gave them ideas from one another. Like some of them had said, oh, I bought a bike, and they've been biking. So that's a nice one. The other reason, of course, is that it showed them that I care. It showed them that this is important, and I want you to think about this. So then, a few classes after, I was able to say, okay, is everybody doing their self-care, and make sure that that was part of, what we discussed. So there's some research that's been done on occupational stress. And as a lot of you know, I do lots of training on self-care. So I could do a day with you, but I'm just going to go through a few things here. That these are the 4 most effective strategies of coping with stress, according to this researcher. And I want to share them with you, and I hope that you will share them with your students, or at least model them for your students. So building resistance through healthful lifestyle. So deep relaxation, nutritious diet, and supportive friendships. So I know right now, I'll speak for a lot of us, that my diet has definitely gone downhill. I'm trying to get back to the nourishing foods. It's real easy when you're home and when you're stressed to eat junk food, or what we might call comfort food, but trying to make sure that I'm getting back to lots of water and greens and fruits and vegetables, and remembering that that's really what is taking care of myself. Supportive friendships. So maybe we're getting kind of, again, fatigued, but setting up a time to have a call with a friend, or to see people over screen like we are now, or even letters. There's things we can do to make sure that we're staying in touch and checking in with people. Now, this one is tricky right now. It was already tricky, but compartmentalizing your work life and your home life. Pretty hard when your work is in your home for most of us. But as someone who worked from home beforehand, I can tell you that it's really important to not have work constantly seeping in. So taking time to make sure, okay, this is when I work is done. I'm going to go do something nice for myself, or, at least put that aside for now. Engaging in regular physical exercise, so important, and something that thankfully we are able to continue to do. I know you might be feeling like, well, the gym's closed, or I can't be in an area with a lot of people. I'm someone who's always just gone in my yard, or gone in my parking lot, or gone in my living room and worked out. And there's even more opportunities these days. Going back to number 1 with the deep relaxation, there's yoga that's available online for free. The YouTube is sort of the great equalizer for a lot of this. So you can go and do physical activity, good for your mind, your spirit, your body. I've mentioned the cortisol, stress hormone. That's one of the things that's absolutely proven to help with that. So deep, whether it's taking deep breaths, doing some running, some walking, whatever it is. And then interrupt strained situations and withdraw physically from them if they become exhaustive. So maybe you have a friend that calls and tells you, oh, did you see the numbers today? Have you seen how many people have died? Have you, maybe you're being careful about your exposure to the news. That might be a person that you need to limit your exposure with, or that you need to let them know, hey, you know what, let's talk about something more positive. Have you seen that great video about all the nurses and how they did a dance after someone came off a ventilator? We have to keep in mind that, especially right now, the messages that we're letting in are so important to our mental health, our physical health, our stress. So One thing that's really powerful is a gratitude practice. I've asked several people in my life, some of you are probably listening right now, to write a few things that you're grateful for before you go to bed. Just writing 3 things you're grateful for before bed, and there are apps that will prompt you to do it, so you don't even have to remember. 3 things you're grateful for before you go to bed has been shown to change the brain. One of the things that happens when you do that is during the day, you start thinking about what am I grateful for? What's the thing I'm going to write today? So instead of focusing on the negative, you become more aware of the things that we do have to be grateful for. So this is really important for us, for all of us, but I love that when we do it and we model it, we can share it with our students. And again, it's a way to show that you care and to humanize. And one of the last things I'll say before we look at questions is, I think one of the things that's so important, and I really respected that Kim talked about this in our intro, is we need to be honest. We can be positive and look at what we're grateful about, but we still have to be honest that this is a difficult time. We have to be honest about challenges. And for example, one of the days when we had a webinar and we did have a Zoom bomber, I said it out front to everyone. We have people on here who are not here for what we're here to offer. They're trying to put negative messages here. And I think that we never want to whitewash. We want to make sure that we're being honest with our students, our audience, everyone, that if we're having a rough day or if something isn't going well, or I was trying this activity with you guys and it really didn't go well, and that's okay. So yes, I think that's it for me. I would love to hear any questions. And thank you.
So folks, if you have questions, remember to type them into the question and answer box. Cary, so far, no questions. I think it was very clear.
Thank you.
So we'll give it a few minutes to see if people have questions.
Okay, great. I mean, one of the things I wanted to highlight, Kim, was that you had written a couple blogs about remote learning. So we sort of we've kind of tried to do for you guys both sides, some of the challenges of remote learning and some of the things you can do, as well as how to support the students. So if you haven't read those blogs, those are available, as well as I believe later today, a blog that I wrote in a similar topic will be out.
Yeah, if it's not already, it will be later this morning.
Yeah. So I guess, Kim, would you add anything to what I've said?
Wouldn't. I actually, so the question is, where do you find the blogs?
Yeah.
So it's on the ICUDDR webpage, icuddr.org. And then it is under About Us, I think, or.
Yeah, the very first tab at the left, About Us, you go down and the blogs, you'll see blog.
At the bottom. Mm-hmm. So we have no questions, but we have a couple. Thank you for your presentation.
Well, thank you. Just ask something for fun. Just, try to stump me. I would love if anyone has anything that's worked well for them, because as I said, I'm definitely still learning in this remote world. So if anyone has things that they've tried, that would be lovely for all of us. I've seen some neat things like Kim and I are working, for those of you who know the Universal Treatment Curriculum, they're doing some participatory things in that. For example, one thing they did that was really simple was they had definitions of terms, and then all the students had to try to guess what that definition was, what the term was. So that was kind of a fun, rapid pace thing to remind people what's addiction versus dependence, what's withdrawal and tolerance, and it was kind of a fun way to do it. And that was for adult learners. So.
Yeah, no questions, Cary, just thank yous. Well, we can wrap it up if there are no questions. Here's one. How do your learners access the mobile network? Do you pay for data or do they pay for themselves?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we've had personally, in my experience with the university, all the students are using their own data, whatever data or internet they have. But I do know that we've had, maybe Kim, you can speak to that a little bit, some, if they're involved with grants or if they're involved with certain things, there have been times when people have paid for their internet, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it depends on who the learners are, right? So like our university students, I think universities are starting to grapple with that. If we're going to have to, at least in the United States, if we're going to have to teach in this modality going forward, I know that some of my students had they live out in the country, they had terrible internet, and it was really a struggle to do anything that was virtual synchronous. So if you're talking about learners like with the UTC programs, it does depend. Some grants might support that. It's actually a conversation that we're having now, because even some of our trainers don't have good internet, and we have been able to support internet upgrades where they're available, or people going to a new location to be the trainer. But we haven't, I don't know that we have really started to grapple with the learners aspect of that. You know, this transition is new for all of us, and a rapid kind of thing. So
I wonder if grants or other resources will become available as we move forward, especially in resource poor countries. Like I would imagine that there would become, I don't know of any now, but I would imagine that there would become some grants or, you know, ways to scholarships or things like that to get resources.
Yeah, and I think we're also trying to learn how to do a lot more asynchronous education that doesn't require strong internet connections. So I think it's a process that we're all learning and trying to adapt to. The question about the slides. So we are recording this. I probably should have said that at the beginning, and hope that it's okay with you all that we're recording this. So the recording will be available probably by tomorrow on our YouTube station, which you can access also through the icuddr.org website, or you can go to YouTube and just type, search for ICUDDR. And so far, nobody else is using our stuff to post things. And I think we'll post the PowerPoint slides in addition to the video, with Cary's permission, as a PDF in our resources tab on the website.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, if anyone, whether you're watching this later or if you just think of things later, if you have ideas, suggestions for people who are interested in this topic, we would love to hear it. You can certainly email me. My email is Eyles, EYLESC @icuddr.org. So yeah, or you can reach out to us on the website.
I think I could actually maybe even post that. Let's see.
Because I know for me, and probably a lot of you, we're lifelong learners, and this is a new challenge. So it's a way to be better educators and be more creative.
Okay, I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you, Cary. Thanks everyone for joining us. Look for the recording and look for our future webinars. I think we have another one already this week, Thursday on prevention. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you all.